On this edition of Confessions of a Marketer, we're talking product marketing. I'm Mark Reed Edwards. Welcome back to episode 23 of Confessions of a Marketer. We'll get to the discussion on product marketing with my old friend Josh Martin in just a moment. Coming up, we have a few terrific episodes in the works. I've got Joe Koshurba next week to talk about design in an era of sameness. Then we'll talk with Professor Bob McCullough about the next generation of marketers. Plus, we just confirmed a chat about GDPR in the next couple of weeks with the CEO of Wonderman Data. If you don't know what GDPR is, you will soon. Lots more to come, so stay tuned. On to Josh Martin and product marketing. Josh and I first met at a market research firm about 10 years ago. He was an analyst, a bright analyst at that, and he seemed to have a knack for distilling complex issues down to the facts, whether it was a market, a company, or some other argument. He went on to a couple of other firms, but a few years ago landed with LogiAnalytics in product marketing. I wanted to get the inside scoop on product marketing, how it should work, why it's important, and so forth. And I thought Josh would be the ideal person to discuss it with because I knew he'd have a unique perspective. Let's get to the chat. Josh Martin, it's great to have you here on Confessions of a Marketer. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. It's great to speak to you today.
So you came into product marketing from the analyst world. So how did those skills you honed over that part of your career prepare you for your current role?
Yeah, I think it was actually really essential to my success. And the primary criteria that I would look at is the ability to really understand a market. That was something that I did a lot of as an analyst, not surprisingly. I've always kind of defined the analyst world as there are kind of two types of analysts, right? You have analysts that pick a topic and they're very, very deep and knowledgeable about that topic. They know the key players, and that's kind of what they cover for 15 or 20 years of their career. And then you have another type of analyst, which is kind of what I was, and I kind of bounced around from different topic areas. So I started covering video, and then I covered the internet, and then I covered internet video, and then I covered consumer electronics and mobile applications. And the one thing I learned in making all those transitions was you need to have a really methodical way to understand and assess what a market is looking for, what the conditions are in order to be successful, and ultimately what the competitive landscape looks like. And all of those skills are really important in product marketing. And it's not a direct transition because ultimately you're taking, a sidestep, right? You're going from being more of a thinker and a writer to someone that needs to execute. So those skills are very different. But I think those foundational elements were essential to me being successful in my role.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting corollary between looking at a broad market and looking at a kind of an individual company's market.
Yeah, what's funny now is now on the other side, we work with a lot of analyst firms at this point in time, and the world has changed fairly dramatically because I remember as an analyst, we'd often want to provide strategic and tactical advice to our customers and talk about kind of how they need to compete in the future and where the market was headed, and the high-level stuff was fine. But ultimately, when you were thinking about strategic information, and we get pitched by analyst firms all the time that are trying to say, well, we'll help you with your go-to-market or we'll help you with your strategy and understanding the marketplace. And it's very difficult to find analysts that are as knowledgeable about the market because, we're competing in it every day.
Right.
And it's not particular to me or to Logi, but it really is relevant for any kind of practitioner. Getting advice from an outside party is challenging. So we've kind of transitioned to now use the analyst community really for third-party validation. So they kind of understand the market and the competitive landscape, and they can take the 10,000-foot view and provide that context to our customers in a way that us saying it probably wouldn't be very helpful because obviously we're a bit biased, even if we want to be as credible as we can be whenever we write something. But that's kind of how we use the analyst community. But having the ability to create really compelling content is also incredibly important because, as we know, kind of the inbound strategy of creating material that appeals to buyers throughout their entire journey. The stat that's always bandied about is 50+% of research is done online before someone wants to talk to a salesperson. So making sure that you're setting yourself up as credible, knowledgeable, helpful are all things that are really, really important when you're trying to build influence with buyers down the road.
So is that a lesson you would give your younger self as an analyst?
Yeah, I think I would probably do things very differently. I remember as an analyst, I always wanted to talk strategy, and it was something that was always interesting to me. But I always felt that we weren't really in a legitimate position to do that because, again, we weren't practitioners of that. And it's just a different set of skills, right? So the advice that you give people as an analyst has to be very different than the ground level work necessary to be successful in a tactical role like product marketing. But I think that was helpful, and some of my lessons that were good and bad as an analyst have informed my ability to execute here. So one of the stories I've told in the past, and I recently did a webinar with Pragmatic Marketing talking about market definition, and one of the key things that you need to think about there is there a market that's sizable enough for your product? And the story that I told was when I went to Strategy Analytics, which is a market research firm based in the Boston area, I built a mobile application research practice. I stayed there for several years. The practice was very successful. I left. And I'm actually coming back and tried to build a different service based on similar data sets. And 2 or 3 years later, the market had changed, and I didn't do my due diligence to understand and assess what the competitive landscape looked like, what the market looked like, what the market would bear. And what we tried to build ultimately wasn't successful as a result. And they've kind of taken some different turns after I wound up leaving there and joining Logi. But it was a good reminder that if you don't thoroughly understand what you're getting yourself into, you're going to find yourself in a quagmire.
So you're a product marketer now, and what are kind of maybe the 3 things you'd recommend that a person does in that role when they first start?
So it depends on where you're coming in the group, and how big the company is. So those are the caveats I'll put up front.
Yep.
I think the challenge is that you need to really understand 3 key areas, right? If you want to be successful in product marketing, you need to understand the market, you need to understand the product that your company is selling, and perhaps multiple products if you're supporting the corporate entity, and you need to understand kind of the sales process. And the first thing I would do is try to figure out all of those things, because even if you've been a product marketer, you may have frameworks that are super helpful for you in terms of creating an understanding of what's happening. But you're probably entering a situation, even if you're in the exact same space. Like if I went to another BI company, the differentiators would be different, right? The competitors will be slightly different. The value propositions will be different.
Right.
So the number one thing that I would do is understand what your product is, understand what the sales process is, positive and negative, and then ultimately start forming opinions. The one thing I always suggest to people is to not go in with a preconceived notion that either you know everything or that you have a hunch. Go in open-minded. It gives you the opportunity to assess your own series of beliefs as well. And there are lots of people that know lots of things, from the CEO down to the marketing intern. So talk to everybody and get their feedback and perspective before you start executing. Because if you run before you learn to walk, as we all know, you're likely to fall.
Right.
So that was only one, but I feel like there was a lot of things built into that, Mark. So I hope that was all 3 built into one answer.
I think it was fairly comprehensive, because also every situation is different, right? Every mature company is different. There are different sizes. They have different market segments that they're going after, and that just fundamentally makes them different.
Yeah, and the one thing that's been interesting here in this role is I joined as a product marketing manager, and the company was going through a fairly significant transition. Again, I work for a company that does BI and sells a platform for analytics. So if you're a software vendor, you buy our platform, you plug it in, and then you can add analytics to your application without having to build it all yourself. And we were going through a transition. We had sort of looked at the end user market, so like the Tableau market, and tried to build a product that was focused on those users. And not surprisingly, when you're a mid-sized company competing with the likes of Power BI by Microsoft or Tableau, it's very, very difficult to get traction in a market. So we were going through a significant transition from a world that if I had joined the company 3 months earlier or 6 months earlier would have been very different. So we went from, we have 2 products, we're focused on end users, to we're going back to our core product, which is a platform. We sell to product managers and developers, and really trying to dig in on the personas and personalities of those people, understanding the value propositions that are related to those buyer and user personas. So anything can change in any moment, and you ultimately have to have the frameworks necessary to adjust and also be flexible to adjust, right? If we had stayed with our opinions of, well, we're going to just tackle this market, we're going to keep going after it, we're going to burn a ton of money, we probably wouldn't have been successful. But because we were able to transition and understand, who our buyers were, who we were most successful with, we were able to effectively make that transition back. And now we've well positioned ourselves with this particular buyer segment, who we think is really the future of our company, and that's who we focus on servicing every day.
Right. The pivot is a key skill in product marketing, I would imagine.
It's very difficult. And then to kind of discuss the point you made before in regards to the situation of an individual company, really the personalities of the product team, the personalities of the folks on the sales team, the types of executives you have, all will really impact your ability to be successful. I mean, at larger companies, they have someone that's focused exclusively on sales enablement, another person that's exclusively focused on competition and competitive enablement. And they have people that are kind of subject matter experts in each of these functional areas. And at Logi, we don't have that, right? It's me, and I have someone on my team that focuses on customer marketing, which is a function that we've been building out in 2018. So that also will have a big impact. If you're going to work for a very large company, you're probably going to be in a very specific vertically kind of focus kind of a role, right? You'll have one area that you'll get very, very deep in, but you probably won't have exposure broadly. Whereas the role that I'm in, I'm everywhere, right? I work with the product team. I help the CEO with special projects. I do data analysis. I do market sizing. I mean, we do all of these things on a regular basis because the market changes on a regular basis, and we're the team that supports that. So those are pros and cons. If you are thinking of getting into product marketing, being in a small company will give you a lot more visibility into different things, but being in a large company will let you become an expert.
Sure.
And for me, I've kind of made my career decision a long time ago. I like doing lots of different things and not being boxed into a particular area. But for some people, getting deep into something really, really deep is what they're great at. And that's what drives things forward at the company.
Everyone's different, right?
Yep. That's what makes the world great.
So if you had a clean slate and you were at a startup, forget about budget and all that, how would you envision the product marketing role working?
I think the way that we've set it up here is useful. So here at Logi, I think the product marketing needs to be in part of the senior leadership team. Mm-hmm. And I think the one thing that I would like to do is get product marketing involved earlier in market definition. So really working with the product team and defining the different roles of people, because obviously there are swim lanes that get very frequently crossed into each other, and that's not a bad thing. But I think understanding the capabilities. So my strength has always been in the research area and defining a market, understanding market problems, and working with the product team to articulate values that our product has in the form of unique selling propositions that address those problems. But I think I might do it a slightly different way at a startup where I might say, let's start with the market problems versus we have this product and it does 25 things. Let's pick the 3 that are most relevant. I would probably be more involved earlier on with the product team saying, this is what the market looks like. Let's do our due diligence. Let's find the next big area that's a key focus for us versus, we have technical debt we have to pay off, or we have a big demand from an existing customer, or a competitor just released this feature. I think I would probably approach things slightly differently and find a way to get market data and insight and information to be core and critical to every decision the product team makes, and not to the point where you're kind of paralyzed and can't move forward, but certainly to the point where the decisions you make have a lasting impact on the market, because you don't get many bites at the apple in any kind of software environment or really any business that you're in at all anymore. So you have to do things right. No one has unlimited budget. No one has unlimited resources. So you've got to make the right decisions, prioritize the right features, and then it's easier to articulate that to the market if you're actually solving a problem.
Right. And often a product marketer is in the position of trying to find a market for a product rather than finding a market and building a product to fit that market, right?
Yes, I guess in my idealized world of a company, it could be the other way around.
Yeah.
Hey, here's a problem. Let's build a product to solve it. And it's not always going to be that way, right? Sometimes you're going to have to work to articulate the value propositions. But then the challenge is identifying the right segment of people that have that particular problem, highlighting that problem to them, figuring out who they are, what they care about, how to talk to them, partnering with a strong marketing team that can target those folks and really focus on the pains that they're feeling, because that's kind of where we are in the world of marketing, right? You can talk to people about their hopes and dreams and aspirations, but in the B2B world, it's really a pain-oriented. Yeah. You have this problem, we can solve it, because you're going to have to go justify budget. And I've never heard anyone go for budget and say, I feel really a lot better about myself, Mr. Boss Man or woman, if you would just approve this budget and we could use this piece of software. I'm pretty sure that that's a recipe for not getting a budget approved. So usually there's a problem, and you have to solve that problem.
Yeah, it's not about my self-esteem. It's about helping the company solve a problem.
It would be wonderful if it was. There's so many things I'd like my boss to approve.
So when I met you, you were a bright young analyst, and I don't know whether you had product marketing in your sights, but I guess looking back, what kind of advice would you give to a person early in their career who's thinking about product marketing as a direction?
Yeah, I think the really difficult thing about product marketing is you can get in fairly early as a product marketing manager with a few years of experience. I obviously waited until much later in my career. I had been kind of working for 15 years before I took the role. But I think having exposure to other areas is really important. So for me, my career spanned being an analyst. I took a job as a salesperson for a while at a company called ComScore in Virginia, which wound up not being a very good fit for me. I'm not the pound the phone, try to get the contract signed type of a person. But what I did discover was having the right tools to make a sale is really important to being successful. And I even found that when I was working at Strategy Analytics. So I would say get some practical experience doing the different jobs that you need to support as a product marketer, right? As product marketing, you sit between sales, you sit between the product team, you sit between the marketing team, and sometimes with the executive team as well. So having frontline experience in those areas, I think, is really important to empathizing with the people you work with, because even though you're not in product and empathy is a strong asset in the product team, it really is important in product marketing as well, because if you can't understand why the salesperson, the account executive needs that piece of content, or why the customer may find it useful to distribute that internally to make the case for what they're trying to buy, then it's difficult to get up the energy and the excitement to build it and try to innovate on it and answer and solve problems. So that would be number one. And then I would say try to find a product marketing role, an entry-level type of a role, which are never really entry-level. You usually need about 3 to 5 years of experience to get those jobs, and see if you like it, and then decide if you're going to go with a big company and try to focus on one small area, or if you want to go with a smaller company and get exposed to lots of different things. So, the person we hired to do our customer marketing had no prior experience in product marketing. She was out of school for about 3 years. She had worked at LinkedIn, but now she's building our customer marketing practice because she's had that experience, and she can bring her empathy from a sales perspective and also from a customer perspective and build processes that work, that can leverage her experience at a large company, but also take it on a smaller scale and say, okay, we have a customer account team that has 15 or 20 people in it. How can we optimize their time? How can we make the experience better for our customers? But I don't think those things would be possible if she hadn't previously had experience kind of on the front lines, and also being at a large company helped her significantly because they do have robust training programs and they do have mentorship programs, and all those things helped her accelerate her career to a point where it probably wouldn't have been for another 2 or 3 years if she had started at a smaller company.
Well, Josh, this was a great discussion. Thanks for joining me here on Confessions of a Marketer. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. And just all the executives out there listening, be nice to your product marketing people. Their job is pretty hard.
Wonderful. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Mark.
I really want to thank Josh for being with me. Next week, Joe Koshurba on design in an era of sameness. Lots more in the works, so stay tuned. This episode of Confessions of a Marketer was written, produced, and edited by yours truly. T. Jordan of A-Class Productions wrote the theme music. Confessions of a Marketer is a trademark of Reed Edwards Global Inc., and this episode is copyright 2018. I'm Mark Reed Edwards. See you next time.